Hello and welcome to today's People Make It Work daily response video. I'm joined by our associate Andrea Nixon today. Hi Andrea.
Hi Zara.
Thank you so much for being with us. So Andrea has a deep specialism and skill in building partnerships and nurturing collaboration, nurturing the collective. So really great to have you here and kind of feel where you're at in the moment in the last kind of like 6 weeks of what has happened, because we're now in week 6 of lockdown, and the perspective that you have at this point in time. So I'll pass over to you.
Oh, thank you. Well, today I've been missing the sun. I've found all that drenching rain has been a bit lowering to the spirits. But in Liverpool, where I am, the sun has just come out again, so that's cheering. It's been a roller coaster, hasn't it? And I think it's been a bit discombobulating, really, in time terms. I mean, 6 weeks has in some ways gone like a flash, but it's also felt incredibly slow. And to say, well, actually, we're still only at the end of April, and think how much has happened in that time. But I think also now people are focusing more on the future. They've managed the immediate stuff, and we are all probably a little bit mentally restless now. We may be afraid to move out of lockdown. We may be absolutely desperate to and champing at the bit, but we don't really quite know when we come out of the burrow what the world will look like. So I've just been thinking a bit about that sense of enforced speed of change and how many people have learned so many new skills, new approaches. Some things are going to force, I think, permanent change. Thinking like virtual casting, for example, I think looks here to stay, which is possibly a very good thing and a way of helping wider inclusion in our sector. And then more generally, somebody commented on the radio that the process for running outpatient clinics will never be the same again across the whole of the health sector. So that's an enormous amount of change very fast. And that's contrasted with absolutely at the same time that time for reflection. And coming through that reflection, some of the stuff we are now reflecting on is very difficult. Mm-hmm. And how do we process that? And how can we make sense of it with stuff that we don't know? We just don't know some of it. So those have just been some of the things I've been thinking around.
Yeah, we've had to adapt fast, and it's actually quite surprising how quickly we can adapt to what was enforced on us, really.
Yeah. And with sort of standing back a bit, I mean you just go, humanity is incredible, actually, how rapidly people can take on the new when they need to, and also how well some organisations have worked through that. So obviously the Arts Council, I think, has done an amazing job, but I've also been looking at funders, because I'm always very interested in funders and fundraising, and there's a new trend around funders collaborating. So things like the Western and the Four Foundation and PRSF and the Jerwood and the London Funders Network, they're all thinking about things together, and they are opening up some funders for unrestricted applications. And I think they've been very quick and very brave, very forward thinking about that. And it begs the question for me back to the sector to say, well, how are we working collaboratively? What do our audiences, what do our places need, and how can we probably work together better to provide that? And that's we can't be in competition on some of this stuff. Not enough resource to go around. but we may work better together on certain routes. And I guess some of the stuff around that in big picture, long term, which I think we've only just been starting to really face up to, is the fact that this may be, the way we have to work for 12 months or more, in terms of what people will, not just is there a vaccine, or, does the government tell us we are now free of social distancing. It's with what people currently feel happy with. And Indigo have been doing an audience survey for the theatre sector, which a lot of people still got to run, but they've just sent out the top line results for the first bit of it, and that says that only 15% of people are booking tickets for things. And even if they're booking tickets for anything, it'll be well beyond September. But 21% of people are not booking anything till 2021. They just don't feel confident to do that. And only 20% of audiences say they're going to return to venues just if they're open. They're going to stay away until they really feel safe. And for the over 65s, that figure is much, much lower. It's 15%. So things they're going to need us to do around queuing, limiting capacities, socially distanced seating are really, really clear. And we are going to have to find creative ways of working around those and modelling them, and thinking about how inclusion, innovation, collaborative programs are relevant and affordable and wanted and safe. So what would a socially distanced season really look like? Where might it be? I think for organisations which have been very much in their buildings, this is going to be a whole new way of thinking. So interesting stuff.
And the remembrance that all of these organisations are not on their own.
No, absolutely. But that we may, I don't know, I mean, there's a really interesting article by Alan Brown of Wolf Brown in the States, and he put this article up right at the beginning of all this, called A Sector in Peril. And his sort of big thing is that, undercapitalisation has been part of the cultural sector for a very long time, and we're good at smoke and mirrors. But I mean, in America, obviously, it's a very different system there. But to having more than 6 months capitalisation is hard for most organisations, and we may need to think differently about assets in terms of the wider benefit of place. I mean, he takes it to an extreme, but what is the point of having a Van Gogh in your collection if nobody can see it, and all your cultural sector is going to go to the wall, and all your artists with that? So quite interesting. But I think we will all think about risk in a very different way.
And do you have, with this current perspective and with the knowledge that you've offered there, do you have any advice on like tips or tools or starting to broach these conversations?
I think looking outside our sector as well as in is always a good thing to do. And I know I have talked about this before, but for me, it's one of the purposes of boards, is to have voices and knowledge from other sectors and to find out what they're doing, because business often has some really good tools and tips. Nina Simon is somebody who is always inspiring, and she's just put out a piece called 4 Steps I'm Taking to Figure It Out, and that's a really good read. And she particularly talks about creative dot connection, which is, if you're thinking about your assets, they may not always be the ones which have been on your balance sheet. They may be about your foreign language skills, they may be about your kitchen, they may be about a whole range of stuff that you have and you could offer or use differently. you just haven't done it like that up to now, and that you've got to check assumptions with the community you operate in. You know, it's not you tell them, you consult with them. And I think for many of us that means working really closely, possibly channeled through our local authority with our voluntary sector, as well as the communities we already know and work with. And that sense of, this is going to be community recovery. No, it's not top down, it'll be bottom up as well. And therefore, this whole thing around the social sector and culture as part of that social sector is a bit of a recalibration of the dial for some places and some organisations. And a guy called Andy Haldane, who's chief economist at the Bank of England, has done a little think piece for the FT about valuing social fabric. And his point was that the charitable sector before this provided £200 billion of social value in the UK, and it's been the charitable sector in that widest sense of communities and volunteers and all sorts of others who are going to get us through this. And it will be their kindness and hard work and appropriate help that will be remembered. And he mentioned that Beveridge did another report. I only knew of one Beveridge report, but there's another one which he did in 1948, and he argued for a proper cooperation between what he called public authority and voluntary agency. And it wasn't acted on, and there was not a proper, if you like, a pillar built specifically for the social sector with government. And he thinks that should be radically rethought. And I must say, I think that's a really, really great idea, because for me, I don't think there should be a distinction between as cultural organisations or practitioners, what we do with communities and what we do as artistic programmes. For me, they are the same thing, and we need to be a great deal better at talking about what we do within that social and community sector.
Thank you so much for providing that food for thought, particularly the last point, and for the guide on other places we can find reading that you've suggested in this talk today. So thank you so much for being here and spending time with us.
It's a pleasure. I'd just add a couple of little things, if that's helpful. I know it's sort of singing to the choir, but People Make It Work have a very good website. And I have to say that the Building New Tools for a New Sector little bit on that website is really good. If you just look at all the different questions and the points on it, I think there's just some fantastic things for people to take away and work on without terrifying themselves. And I think also being aware that we don't know a lot of this stuff. This is new. It's not, we haven't got received wisdom we can take from those who know, because nobody's worked through a situation like this. And the data is changing, all the time. There's new stuff to keep going with. And I think my final thing, which might be a bit cheesy, but sometimes it's just nice to find something that is cheering and is kind. And the National Literacy Trust, I just came across this in the paper the other day, but it's just delightful. So they have got a lovely book called The Book of Hopes. It's a book for children, and they have commissioned a whole load of really brilliant writers and illustrators to write stories, poems, create wonderful artwork about hope for children, and some of it is enormously fun and funny. And there's a poem called The Axolotl at Bedtime that by Catherine Johnson, and I have already sent it to quite a few people I know who weren't feeling very happy and who loved it. So just some things to just eventually just make us forget about it just for a second and have a smile.
Yeah, I'm going to go and find the Book of Hopes now.
Lovely, really lovely thing.
Cool. Thank you so much, Andrea, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Bye.